Hey guys, I have a wonderful podcast episode for you today. The special guest this week is Maria Padian. She is the wonderful author of, you might have read her book Wrecked before, but she has another one coming out called How to Build a Heart. And she's going to tell us all about it, and you'll hear about her writing journey and all the other things that the wonderful authors on the podcast share with us. But first I want to tell you about my favorite book of the week. It is Into the Hourglass by Emily R. King. And you've seen me post, well, if you follow me on Instagram, you've seen me post about Emily's Evermore Chronicles books. It's the second book in a series, so you'll want to make sure and go back and read Before the Broken Star, which is the first in the Evermore Chronicles. But I love sharing about Emily's books because she truly is a magician with words, and the way she creates these worlds that you can follow, through 3 or 4 books is pretty incredible. So Into the Hourglass is the second one, and the third one comes out in December. So it's something else that's wonderful about Amazon publishing is that you get this series really close together. So Into the Hourglass by Emily R. King is my favorite book of the week. I do not have a lit chit chat this week, and we are going to go ahead and get to Maria. How about you tell us about your book that is coming out in January, How to Build a Heart?
Okay, thanks. So How to Build a Heart is a story about a girl named Isabella Crawford, or Izzy. And Izzy is 16, and when the story opens, she's living in a town called Clayton, Virginia, and she's a newcomer there. She's only been there about 6 months. And what we need to know about Izzy is that she's moved a lot, and her family is small. She has a mom, and she has a little brother who's only 6, and her dad is dead. Her dad was a Marine, and he died in Iraq. He was from North Carolina. And since her dad's death, Izzy and her mom and little brother have moved a lot as the mom has tried to find better places for them to live and really look for better jobs for herself. The mom is a Spanish speaker. She's originally from Puerto Rico. And it's an interesting part of who Izzy is, that her mom is Spanish and that her dad didn't speak a word of Spanish. And that's been sort of, trying to figure out where she stands in terms of 2 different cultures and backgrounds is a big part of her story. Another thing to know about Izzy is that she's very private and very proud, and they're poor, not desperately poor, but they're pretty much people who really have to count their pennies. And when the story opens, unbeknownst to Izzy, her mom has been applying for them to build a house with Habitat for Humanity. And ultimately this comes through, and it's 2 things. It's a real double-edged sword for Izzy. On the one hand, it's the realization of a dream of permanence in a community and of owning their own home.
Yeah.
But when you build with Habitat, there's a lot of publicity and public relations that goes with it. There are fundraisers, and there's newsletters, and usually stories in the newspaper. And for a girl like Izzy, who's very private about her story, this doesn't feel safe.
No.
So it's one of the things that Izzy has to overcome is really being true to herself, letting her peers know who she is, and also where does she stand in terms of her bicultural background. And so it's a story about coming of age, of embracing who you are, of economic disparity, all sorts of stuff like that in this story. And there's also pretty good romance in there, too.
Oh, well, I mean, you have to have a little bit of that, right?
A little bit of that, yeah.
That is awesome. I love that. I think you have so many things that a lot of different readers can relate to in this story, which is, what it's all about. But that sounds great. I can't wait to read it and to see, everybody else's reactions to it.
Thanks.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your journey to being published, because this How to Build a Heart is book 5 for you, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I guess the beginning is that I'm a bookworm, And I've been a bookworm for as long as I can remember. So from the time I was very, very young, I didn't think there was anything better than being able to make up a story. So I've been writing for as long as I could hold a pencil.
That's awesome.
I've got boxes and boxes of terrible stories in my basement. I'm really determined to burn them all before I pass so that nobody ever has to read them. But, so I've been scribbling for a really, really long time. But I think it wasn't until I was settled in Maine, had a couple of kids, that I started to think professionally about my fiction. And I was very fortunate in that I live in a small town. I live in Brunswick, Maine, and I have a number of friends who are published writers, also a number of college friends who are published writers. And when my kids were in middle school, I started playing around with a character who was about in 8th grade, and I could really hear her voice very clearly because I was surrounded by kids that age. So the dialogue, the issues surrounding middle school were very present to me. And so I started playing around with a story about this particular girl. And luckily enough for me, I had some friends who were already in the business. And I gave them my first 50 pages and said, what do you think of this? How does this feel? I think it might be a novel, but I've never written a novel before. And one of my friends gave it to, and I just cringe with embarrassment when I think of it. They said to me, why don't you give this to our college friend, Catherine Teagan, who is of Catherine Teagan Books, a.k.a. The Imprint with HarperCollins.
Oh,
She
wow.
published Veronica Ross and blah, blah, blah. Well, when I knew Catherine, she was living down the hall in college, and she was just another English major like me. I thought, oh, yeah, I wonder if Catherine would take a look at this and just see what she thinks. That's how really clueless I was at the time. I was deigned to send Catherine Teagan my 50 pages of a beginning novel that didn't even have a title at that point. But it's also a testament to her kindness and professionalism that she took a look and gave me a couple of tips and sort of steered me in the right direction. So I took those first 50 pages, and then from there I was able to build on the comments I got from other professional writers. And ultimately, I had a book. I had a story arc, a climax, a denouement, characters flying all over these pages. And I gave them to one particular writing friend here in Brunswick, and she really liked it and said, nowadays, you need an agent. I didn't know what an agent was. I knew nothing. All I knew was that I loved to make up stories. And she said, I think my agent would like this. Would you like me to give her a call and you can pass this along to her? And so I had an introduction to an agent. And so she called her agent. Agent, sure, send me the pages. And I gave her my manuscript, and she read it and immediately took me on. And I did revisions with her, and then she sold the book. After we did about 6 months of back and forth revisions, she sold the book to Random House in 3 weeks.
Wow.
So my process went from being a complete novice who knew absolutely nothing to stumbling through friends onto the right agent who put it in the right hands. And I never wrote a query letter. I didn't do any of that. I just had this agent who liked the book, and she knew who to give it to, and then we were just off to the races after that.
That's amazing. You're lucky you never had to write a query letter.
I was really lucky because I got to tell you, those query letters and those synopses, that's hard. I'd rather write a 265-page book
Me
than a
too.
2-page synopsis. It's
Yes.
really hard.
Yeah, it's so hard. I've had to do that, and I'm like, I'm dying. Why is this so much harder than writing the book?
Really hard. And when I look at the professionals in publishing who will write the blurbs for the back of our books, I'm in awe of them.
Yes.
I think, wow, how did you summarize that? I couldn't have done that. So, we've all got our different skills, and writing short is not one of mine.
No. I mean, so you didn't have to write a query that first time, which is amazing. But do you have any, through your experience in the publishing industry, any tips for writers who are starting that, process of trying to find an agent and that horrible query process?
Yeah, I think one of the main things I would say, because at this point, too, I'm teaching a lot of writing workshops, and what I find that is we need to honor our apprenticeship. When I say I have boxes and boxes of bad stories in my house, it's no exaggeration. I've been writing for years, for decades really, took a lot of classes, gave my stories to a lot of people who were not always kind and didn't always say, yeah, this is great. Very often they said, boy, this is terrible, and you have to learn from that. So I think the first step I would say is don't worry about getting published. Really think about craft and find trusted people. And that's one of the things I was very lucky about. I had trusted people who were professionals who would give me very good advice. Here's who doesn't necessarily give you good advice: your best friend or your spouse.
Yeah.
Because they want you to love them. And you need to give your drafts to somebody who is willing to say the hard stuff about your writing. And you have to have thick skin and take that criticism, be professional. It's not personal when they criticize your writing. You have to grow from it. So honor your apprenticeship. Give yourself the time to develop your craft. And when you think it's ready to go to an agent, a good way to find an agent, again, is through mutual friends who are in the writing world, but also find books that are like yours and go to the acknowledgments page.
Yeah.
And everyone thanks their agent. And that's how you're going to find somebody who's accepting and looking for books that are kind of like the one you've just written. And I find that works pretty well.
I love that. That's really good advice. Definitely. Actually something I haven't really heard before, because I think we all rush to query. We're like, oh, we finished the book. I think a lot of people do. I got to query. I got to get an agent right away, even if it's like your first attempt at writing a whole entire book, or maybe your second. You know, it takes a while to really hone those skills.
And I was also lucky too in that the agent that I had, she had also been an editor, and she very much would go through draft. I would go through a whole revision process with her before she sent it out to an editor. So I think a lot of agents, especially with a debut novel, you want that to be in great shape.
Oh, yeah.
The best possible shape you can get it before you send it to your agent, and then they're going to work it over with you again, so that when that editor gets it, they want to see, yeah, this is a done deal. If we're going to take a risk on this brand new writer, it's got to be pretty much done.
Right.
So that's another thing, is if you can find an agent who's good at doing drafts and has good editorial skills, that's another real gift.
Something to look for. Great advice. I love that. Because that process is stressful, and I think really can be disheartening. A lot of writers can let it get them down, even though it's hard not to when you get rejection letter after rejection letter, but it's always good advice to make sure you're doing it the right way.
Can I tell you my one agent story?
Yes.
So I would say that finding an agent is the hardest part of this process. It took me longer to find, I lucked into that particular agent who was my friend's agent, but I had also been, just sending some letters out to a handful of other people that I had heard of. Again, from Catherine Teagan. She goes, well, I work with these people. Of course, the people Catherine Teagan works with are the best in the business. So I sent one off to an agent. I'm just going to call her Agent M from Mean. And I sent her, like a little couple of chapters, and, this is who I am, blah, blah, blah. And this person wrote me back, like, this letter that it made me cry. It was the only time in the whole process I actually cried. It hurt my feelings and made me feel like I am such a terrible loose woman. What am I thinking? Oh, my Lord. And she's a big YA agent. She sells all sorts of books. So I was devastated. Move ahead 2 years, and I'm at an event. My first book is published, and Random House is doing a cocktail party for a bunch of us in Philadelphia at ALA. And I go to this party. It's my first book, and da-da-da. And I'm going around with my glass of wine. I'm meeting people. Somebody goes, oh, and have you met so-and-so? And there she is.
Oh, boy.
Agent M. And she looks at my name tag, and she wrinkles her nose because my name is familiar, but she doesn't know why. And she goes, well, have I met you before? I'm like, and I'm thinking, this is my moment. This is my moment to say, and you rejected me, and you were so mean. And I just looked at her, and I go, I don't know. She goes, well, maybe it was at such and such. And she mentioned some conference. And I go, yes, maybe that's the case. And I decided I'm not going to say a word.
No.
I'm just going to move on. But it was one of those things. She was so complimentary. It's so nice to meet you. I can't wait to read your book. Da-da-da. And I didn't tell you, you rejected this book. But it was one of those moments. And I bring it up because here's the thing. There's always going to be those people who think your work is great. There's going to be those people who think your work is terrible.
Yeah.
And no matter what, you have to believe in yourself and keep plodding ahead with that story, because you're the one who ultimately is going to finish that story. You have to believe in yourself and not look necessarily for that outside affirmation.
Yeah, that is great advice. I think I love that you chose not to be like, oh yeah, well you rejected me and now look at me, I think, yeah, that's not the right way to go about it, especially in this industry that we're in. But I saw an agent tweeted, they sent a form rejection to a query, and then that author responded with this really long angry letter asking for a phone call to detailed to explain the rejection. And I'm like, no, that's not the right way to do it. So I love that story.
No. Here's the other one you don't want to poke. You don't want to respond to reviews and critics.
No.
Never go there. Never go there.
No.
You're going to get great reviews. You're going to get bad reviews. I have a bunch of author friends who have written 5, 6, 7 books, bestsellers. They will not go on Goodreads. They will not even look at it.
No.
They're just like, are you kidding me? There's going to be the 5 stars. There's going to be the 1 star. I'm not even looking. So, again, you have to just take a deep breath and believe in yourself and move ahead with your story. That's what you got to do.
Yes. I think, a lot of writers can be sensitive, but as a reader, there have been books that, and as a reader and a writer, I feel like I recognize all the work and effort that goes into each novel. So even if I don't like something, I'm not the type of person to go and bash a book online and leave a 1-star review just because I understand the process behind it. But I recognize that not every book is for every person, and that's why there are so many different books out there.
Yeah. Well, you make a really good point there. I think any of us who have attempted to do this, we appreciate how hard it is and how personal it is. You're putting your heart there on the page, and so we want to handle that carefully. Whether the book appeals to us or not, whether we think it was well written or not, let's acknowledge that this is someone's hard work.
Exactly. I think that is a good reminder for everybody.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Well, I want to know, so this is book 5 for you. How different does it feel to have book 5 coming out compared to your first book?
The blank page is always terrifying. That never goes away.
Yes.
And also exhilarating to realize when you've found a new character that you're going to get to know. That's also exhilarating. I would say the biggest change for me between book 5 and book 1 is I understand the pacing of a novel now so much better than I did. That was my biggest hurdle to overcome, is where I was at in terms of the rhythm of the book, how long it was, the length of my chapters, the story development. At this point, having done this a few times, that feels more organic to me.
Yeah.
And I feel a little more confident in my ability to know the rhythm of a chapter and where I am in the arc. So that's been my biggest change in terms of craft. But sitting down and getting started is still just as hard.
Well, yes, that doesn't ever go away.
No, it doesn't.
Well, that's awesome. I'm so excited. Book number 5. That's great. So, you kind of just answered this question a little bit, but I want to ask you what the hardest part of writing is for you, and then the hardest part of being an author.
Okay, so I know it's going to sound really dumb, but the hardest part of writing for me is sitting.
Oh.
So much sitting.
So much
and
sitting.
I know people keep telling me, get a standing desk, but it's not just the literal sitting, but it's the stillness.
Yeah.
It's the being in one place. And I like to be active, so I have to make sure. A writer friend of mine, Donna Gephardt, she writes middle grade novels. She uses a thing called the tomato timer, and she goes, just set this thing, Maria, write for about 29 minutes, and then get up. And so I literally time myself to get up. I won't stop writing until the timer gets up. And then once the timer rings, I will force myself, even in the middle of a really good sentence, get up, move around, shake, and stretch. So, yeah, the sitting and the stillness, being indoors on a beautiful day, that's hard for me.
Yeah.
The hardest part about being an author, frankly, the comparison game. It's really, I think comparison, particularly now in the age of social media and Instagram, it can be deadly. Whether we're a middle school kid comparing how popular we are to whether we are a some mom looking at other people's happy family photos, or an author looking at how many other hits somebody else's YA novel just got on Instagram.
Yeah.
I think the comparison game is very, very toxic, and so it's important for me to focus on the joy of my own process, the joy of the wonderful publisher I have, the readers I have, the story I've written, and be feeling grateful for what I have, and not constantly comparing myself to somebody who may have better book sales or got invited to a conference I didn't get invited to. That can be really damaging.
Yeah. I think that is something very prominent that's going around and is so easy. We always have these phones in our hands that you can easily compare everything. I've struggled with that. I think everybody has, but that is no fun. I think as aspiring author, I struggle with that comparison when seeing other people who are in my same kind of place in their journey, and then they move forward a lot faster than I am, It's like that same sort of thing. You're excited for them, of course, but that doesn't stop your little doubt voice in your mind.
Oh yeah. And I think that it's as you said, it's not simply social media, it's the prevalence of the smartphones, because we never get away from the social media. And as writers, we are being asked to communicate with our readers via social media, so it's not always a good idea to just turn it off and not participate. So what's that healthy balance? And as someone who writes for young people, and going into schools and meeting with students, I'm seeing the toxic effects of how social media gets us wrapped up in this constant comparison game, which is, I think, very damaging. Very damaging. We got to look out for that.
I think, to my daughter, she's 8 years old. She doesn't really, do social media because she's 8 years old. But even without that, there's a comparison game. Like, she'll come home from school and wants these shoes that a kid has, and think her hair isn't as nice as somebody else's at school. It starts that young, which is just so awful to think about. But it's definitely something we all got to be keep ourselves strong against and keep on watch for. And I've really cleaned up my social media, the accounts I follow. If something makes me feel bad, I don't follow it. I think we got to take that opportunity to really be strong for ourselves and make sure we're putting the right things in front of us.
Absolutely. And that, you make a really good point there, and that also means turning off something that we realize is not affecting us well. And having the discipline to even recognize it, that's tough.
Yeah, it is, especially in the world we live in today.
I know. Oh, gosh.
Crazy. Well, now that we talked about the hardest part, let's talk about the best part. So what's the best part of being a writer and being an author for you?
Okay, so the best part for me of being a writer is being able to sink into that imaginative world and allowing myself to live with my make-believe characters. It was so funny when my daughter was younger and lived home. She would come home from school at the end of the day, and she'd say to me, "So, Mom, what happened today?" And she didn't mean who'd you bump into out when you were walking the dog. She meant, what happened in the world of your novel? And she was so wonderful. She would allow me to talk about my characters like they were real people.
I love
and say, well, today, this is what Henry did, or this is what Brett did. And what was really great about it is she would respond the way a kid would. And she would say, Mom, nobody in my school says that. A kid would never respond that way. She wouldn't do that. And so as I was writing, I was getting a little kid tested too. I thought, oh, this is good. So again, if you're a writer, you have a pretty vivid imagination. And so what's great about being a writer is somebody lets you just sit around and live in that make-believe world. And that's great. The best part for me of being an author is school visits, because I meet readers, and that's really great. I get to come out of my writing cave. I'll go into schools where maybe the whole class will have read one of my books, and they all want to talk about the characters like they're real people, and that's great. I introduce them to my friends, and they like my friends. So that's the best part about being a published author, is that other people have stepped into my stories and engaged with the story, and then they want to share it with me. And I love that. That's great.
That is the best part. I think as a reader too, that's always so cool to be able to connect with your favorite author. And like I've I remember I live in Portland, Oregon, and Pals is a bookstore here and does a lot of cool author events. And I went to a lot when I was growing up, and it was like meeting your, meeting your favorite author was like equivalent to me of like meeting a movie star. So I think that's so cool. It's awesome on both ends, for the author and for the reader.
I just, like I tell you, I just had that experience. I was just at the American Library Association conference, and I got a selfie with Angie Thomas. I couldn't help it. And this is the author of The Hate You Give. And I saw her. I said, I'm really sorry. Would you do a selfie with me? She goes, sure. She's so nice. Then I was in the elevator going back to my hotel, and I'm in the elevator, and there's this real tired, she's this woman, she was really tired. And she, I looked at her name tag, and it said, Meg Medina, who, as you know, just won the Newbery Award for her Mercy Suarez book. And I just looked, I said, you're Meg Medina. And she goes, yes, I am. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm an author, but you're a rock star. It's so fun to meet you. I love your book. Yeah, I can't help it. They're like rock stars to me, too, because as a bookworm, these are my people. Like, I want to meet them. So, I love going to bookstore events and meeting other authors. It's great.
It's so great. I know. I've been a bookworm since forever, and that's just the best part, is meeting these people. You're like, you wrote my favorite little world. Like, how awesome that it came from your brain.
No, it's great. It's really good.
I love it. Well, my next question is about your writing style. So this is the pantser or planner question, which planner, like not hardcore, but outlining, or pantsers really just kind of like free-flowing writing, not, outlining beforehand and kind of then making yourself edit a lot at the end. How do you kind of fit into that?
Okay, somewhere in the middle. So I'm one of those weird writers who I know the beginning of my story, I know the end of my story, and I have no idea how I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
No idea. And one of my favorite metaphor for writing, and some famous writer made this up, I don't know who, but my favorite metaphor for writing is you're driving in the fog at night with headlights on. You can only see about 10 feet in front of you, but keep going, and eventually you're going to get to your destination. Now, what I personally would add to that is, along the way, pick up hitchhikers.
Nice.
And I tell my kids in my writing workshop, in real life, never pick up hitchhikers, and don't hitchhike, that's not safe. But in your imaginative life, pick them up, let them in the car. Because what's true about hitchhikers is that hitchhikers will often report they will get into a car or a truck, and they will talk and tell the driver, who's a stranger, things about themselves that they might not even confess to their closest friends and family.
Wow.
And I think of hitchhikers as secondary characters who have kind of crept into the story, but I didn't think that they were going to be particularly important. But they start to talk and do little interesting things. The next thing I know, that character is in the next scene, and then they're in another scene. And what I find is that suddenly this hitchhiker has gotten in the car, and I thought I was going to San Francisco, but all of a sudden the hitchhiker said, nope, we're going to Dallas. Go left. And suddenly the story gets more interesting. And with me, every single book I've written has had a hitchhiker who has changed the direction of the story and helped me get to my destination. Every one of the books. And what was so interesting about How to Build a Heart is I was kind of well into the story, and I didn't know who the hitchhiker was. And I remember saying to my daughter, I'm really nervous. I've been driving for a while here, and there are no hitchhikers. Nobody is emerging as the hitchhiker. She goes, Mom, just keep writing. And sure enough, I got a hitchhiker. And that hitchhiker took me to the end. And that's my process. It's this crazy, wacky thing, but it works for me.
I love it. That is so great. I love Pick Up the Hitchhiker. That's the best. Yeah. Not in real life, but
not never in real life. No.
Yeah. I in that question, I definitely fall more towards a pantser. not the book I'm working on now, but the one before it, I just would sit down every single day and just read like the last little bit of what I wrote and just keep going, and just authors say, let my characters take me where they want. But it was like the hitchhiker. It was the hitchhiker telling me where to go. So that's an awesome way to put it.
Yeah. And what I'm also hearing from you, too, is that you're letting your characters drive it. And that's, one of my favorite books on writing is Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. And she has this wonderful section where she says, plot follows character. So you've got to get to know that character. And when you know what that character is all about, they'll just start to do things. And that's the plot. So, as you said, it's got to be, at least to me, the best books are, they're character-driven. If they're plot-driven, the characters are just cardboard cutouts that somebody stuck in there.
Yeah. My characters definitely, they take control. I'm like, where are you going?
I know. It's so fun.
It's the best. I love that. I loved learning about different, other writers and how they do it, because we all do it very differently. I know people who outline for like a year before they even put words on a page. I know people who are like me and people who are in between too. So I think it's great.
Here's a question I've got for you. Do you use Scrivener or any of those programs that helps you to kind of like create templates and outline, things like that?
I don't use Scrivener, but I use Dabble. It's a web-based writing tool, and it has some outline tools and character cards and things like that. But I like that it's web-based, and it formats the chapters and all that really nice for you. Yeah, I do a lot of my outline and all that in like an Excel spreadsheet. I have like this Excel spreadsheet with like 10 different tabs, and got my characters, things written out about them, and like my rough outline. I do like the 4-act story and trying, fit things in there. But I do a lot of my editing or my outlining once I'm like halfway through the novel already. I'm like, okay, let's see where we are, and then see where we're gonna go to finish, because I usually know like you, like how I want it to start and where I want it to end, but it's figuring out the middle part.
The rest of the book.
Right? The majority of the book. So you said that you've always been a bookworm, which I love, and I'm sure that, fed a lot into your love of writing, but how, did you have a moment where you were like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to write my own book? Or I know you talked a little bit about it in your story already, where you just had, those 50 pages, but was there a moment where you were like, I could do this?
I don't know if I ever had a moment where I thought I can do this. I think I had a moment where I thought, okay, if I don't take myself seriously, I'm going to dabble at this and never finish a book.
Yeah.
And it was my 40th birthday, where I hit 40, and there was something about the number that I thought, you know what? These 10 years since 30 went really fast. I don't want to get to 50 and be where I'm at with my writing life. Yeah. I want to feel like when the next 10 years are over, that I don't necessarily have to have been published, but I have had to have really given it a serious effort and taken myself seriously. And I gave myself permission to take myself seriously and actually devote that time every single day to working on a particular project. And I started doing that when I was 40. And I think that was the moment that I recognized that it was okay to take myself seriously. I didn't have to make apologies for whether I was writing or not writing. And I say this to kids all the time when I go into schools and we're doing workshops. I go, if you don't say, I want to be a writer. I said, you write a story, you've worked on a story, you are a writer. Being published, selling it, getting it checked, that doesn't make you a writer. Writing makes you a writer.
Yeah.
So just do it. And give yourself permission to have it your own space, your own notebooks. Believe in your characters. Share your work with other people. Take yourself seriously. That's okay. And again, I think, like I said, I dabbled with it a lot, thought about it a lot, practiced, but not until I was maybe 40 did I actually say, I'm going to write this novel. I'm going to write it. And, yeah.
That's awesome. I think it is something that can be a little nerve-wracking to be like, okay, I'm going to finish it. I'm going to do it, because it's a large undertaking, but I think that's awesome.
And I think a lot of people, too, you'd be surprised at how many people talk about writing but don't actually sit down and do it. That's that sitting part.
Yes, the sitting
really
still.
And again, getting back to honoring your apprenticeship, is, and that's not my phrase. It's another wonderful Maine writer's name is Bill Rohrbach, and he wrote a whole wonderful essay about it. And he said, I don't think we do a good enough job of honoring our apprenticeship and all the years that go into preparing for this. You hear about it all the time. People say, oh gosh, if I'm just going to take a little sabbatical, crank out that novel. And people think because I can read, I can write. Because I love stories, I can just crank out a novel. And they sit down and they just go from 0 to 90 and say, well, I'm going to start working on a novel today. And they've never written a scene or written a short story or written just a page of dialogue. I mean, those of us who are ultimately doing this, we've practiced over and over. And that's a big part of it, is saying it's like you don't just sit down and say, oh, I'm going to make a pair of shoes today. No. Become an apprentice and you learn how to be a cobbler and you learn all the skills first. And it takes a long time.
It does take a long time.
Yeah.
That's good. I love that advice. So tell me a little bit about what your revision process looks like as you're maybe, I know some people revise kind of as they're going, or, what do you do to make sure you've got everything where you want it to be before you send it off?
I'm not one of those people who, writes, blah, just throws a lot of stuff on the page and throws it off. I write probably a little more slowly than that, and just sort of eke out my chapters a little more slowly. What I would say is that I've got a handful of very trusted readers who I will give them drafts maybe when I'm about 3 or 4 chapters in, and they'll give me a reality check, and then I'll be off to the races. Like, once I've gotten started and have maybe 3 or 4 chapters, so we're looking at maybe 50 pages, I'll give them to trusted readers. Then I'll just finish it. Then it's going to be serious revision time. And that's often, it's been with my agent, where literally sometimes I'll hand her something, she'll go, this is wonderful, cut a third, which is just devastating. It's a lot of cuts.
Yeah.
The other thing I do, and I'd asked you before about Scrivener, I'm a bit of a Luddite, so one of the things I do is I get a big piece of oak tag after the book is all done, and I literally do a plot map where I'll draw a little box, and in each one of the boxes, I'll scribble what happens in the chapter, how long the chapter is, and I'll color code all the characters, so who's in the chapter.
Ooh.
And I'll also be able to check to say, does the plot move forward in some way, which is really important in writing for kids. You got to keep that moving. And also by color coding the characters, I can stand back, I can tape it to the wall, and I can look and say, wow, I've got 7 chapters where yellow just disappears. And, you don't realize that when you're in the weeds of the book. So,
that's
again,
smart.
I can look and see if I've got a chapter that's too long, a chapter that's too short. And again, I do this on a piece of oak tag with all my little scribbles. And every one of my novels, I've saved that piece of oak tag. And so I know that there are these marvelous programs out there where people can do this online, but it's working for me to do it the old-fashioned way. That's how I've been doing it. So that comes really toward the end. I might do one more cleanup revision after that, and then it'll be probably ready to go to an editor after that.
I love that. I'm definitely the kind of person that I love to touch real paper when I'm doing those revision sort of things. So I print a lot of things out, and that's a good idea to color coordinate or to color, highlight characters and see where they go. Because I've definitely had that happen where I'm like, where did this character go? I haven't seen them in 10 chapters.
Yeah, and that's one of the questions, like an editor. I've got a wonderful editor at Algonquin right now, and editors, people think, editors, they've got the pen and they're marking things up. Not really. A really great editor is a question asker. And they will ask me certain questions because they've got questions in the book. And one of the main ones will be, why did so-and-so disappear on chapter 7? And then we didn't hear from her. And I'll go, oh. So again, that color coding really helps me make sure that I've got everybody consistently woven through in some way.
That's awesome. I think that is a good way to do it. I love hearing how other, writers' writing process works. The revision process is so important too. I love learning about different things. That's a good one. I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah. I think, too, I always say this to young people that I'm working with. I said there really is no such thing as writing. It's all rewriting.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to love revision. And as painful as it is, you can't think. And here's one of the things that's really nice about a computer is that nothing is ever just cut and disappears. You can cut and save it. You don't have to really say, I'm killing these darlings. I'm just putting them aside, and I'll use them again. But you have to be willing to go in there and just pull out stuff and change it and monkey around with it. And I think if you don't like that process, you might not do this job.
I have just one last question for you. It's one of my favorite questions, and I feel like you will have lots of things to say about it. But I'm a bookworm, so I love to know what other authors are reading, because I think reading is so crucial to being a writer. So so crucial. So what is your favorite book right now? It is not your favorite book of all time, just your favorite book that you've read recently.
My favorite book that I've read recently is a non-fiction book called Say Nothing by an author named Patrick Radden Keefe. And it's about Northern Ireland and the period of time called the Troubles. It's my dad is Irish. I'm half Irish, so I love Irish history. And this book reads like a murder mystery whodunit, but it's fascinatingly well-written history. You turn pages so quickly and learn so much about that period of time. I think I devoured this book in 2 days, and it's really thick. It's out. It's in bookstores right now. So that's been my new favorite book that I just finished. If I could just give a pitch for one more book, so the young adult book I just finished, and I turn pages really fast, is called In the Neighborhood of True, and this is by an author named Susan Kaplan Carlton. And this marvelous book is set in Atlanta in 1958, and it's about this girl from New York who relocates down to Atlanta with her mom and little sister because her dad has passed away. And it's a snapshot into what society looked like for a teenage girl in Atlanta at the time. And I used to live in Atlanta, so this was really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful sort of a crime that's been committed, and it's sort of like a what happened here that gets you turning pages, and all these wonderful characters. And again, it was a marvelous read and a great peek into a period of time that I didn't know very much about.
That's awesome. I love books like that. Well, I will definitely have to check those out because they both sound great. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I literally feel like the luckiest person to be able to chat with authors like you and to be able to learn from you and your experience. It is probably my favorite part of all of this. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And if you don't mind, could I ask you, what are you reading right now? Because again, it's summertime and I'm looking for books.
I am reading, let me pull it up. I get a lot of arcs and read them. So the one I'm reading right now, what is it? It is called Almost Midnight by Paul Dorian, and it comes out soon, I'm pretty sure. Just in like a few days. Let me double check. But it comes out on the 2nd, so Tuesday. It's kind of different than what I normally pick, so I just I love to read all kinds of different books. And it's about a game warden, so like animals. He investigates crimes against animals, which is cool. And he's got a few different storylines going on. His best friend, like through his whole life, is in prison for defending them against some people who are trying to murder them, and something crazy goes down in the prison, and he's kind of trying to help his friend figure it out. And then he also had a wolf that he found and adopted, and it's like a wolf dog, and it was shot and is dying, and he's trying to figure out who shot the wolf.
Oh, that sounds great.
It's really great. It was awesome. I'm almost done with it, and it was a really good read. It's nice to have those two storylines that are pretty different. You're investigating a wolf crime and, something crazy going on with the guards at a prison, and it was really good.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, but that one comes out just in a couple days, so that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again.
Hold on one second. Let me just say really quick. So you say Almost Midnight by Paul Dwyran from Maine?
Yeah.
I know him.
No, you don't.
Paul. Yeah, I do. He wrote that. That's the series. So he started off with The Poacher's Son.
I love it.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. So Paul was my first editor at Downey's Magazine.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny.
That's so funny. Oh yeah, his books are great. Oh, and if that's your first Paul Dwyran, start with The Poacher's Son. You won't be able to put these down. Okay. He writes about Maine so beautifully.
I feel like I need to go to Maine. I've read a lot of Maine-based books recently. I feel like I need to go.
I cannot believe, because you're saying Paul. You're describing this book and you're going Paul Dorian. I'm
terrible at pronouncing names.
Yeah. Yes, no, that's Paul. Oh my gosh, yeah. Those books are great. The Mike Bowditch series.
Yes, the Mike Bowditch series. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed it. And I find that sometimes with these arcs that I get, I do end up like in the middle of a series, but it's still great. Like even if not having read the previous ones, it's still great and I love it.
No, then that's what's cool about that series. They function as standalones too. So that's really great. Ha ha.
That's so funny.
Terrific.
Such a small world.
Yes, small writing world for sure.
Oh, for sure.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed getting to know Maria and hearing about her new book, How to Build a Heart. I had 2 episodes come out today, so the other one is with literary agent Ann Tibbetts. Go ahead and check that one out next. Thanks, guys.